To move on to our top story
it's that
now.
witch Fitzgerald. She's doing this.
Hopefully without any.
No, it's happened again. As I said
It keeps happening.
Brilliant, man.
Well, there is fresh chaos for the Tory party, as well as us, as two more MPs quit, forcing Rishi Sunak to organise a mini-reshuffle. Well, James Heappey has been replaced by Leo Doherty as Armed Forces Minister, and in a change to the Education Minister role, Robert Halfon has stepped aside and been replaced by Luke Hall.
I've got to hand it to you, Corporal Thought. You are cool. TalkTV's political correspondent, the excellent Alicia Fitzgerald, is back with us. We're also joined by Chief Political Correspondent for The Times, Aubrey Allegretti, and a ghost called Mary, who's just made it into the studio. It's weird, you two, isn't it? I mean, if you're listening on the radio, it's a bit difficult, but it keeps flashing up different colours.
Yeah, it's quite dull. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so it's just kind of switching the screens.
We'll just embrace it as part of,
I think it's quite. It kind of. We could use it as a metaphor for what's happening in the Tory party.
Absolutely.
Maybe the lights are about to go off here. I don't know. The whole thing's gone on,
Maybe we'll wait and see. But yeah, maybe that's good timing. We've had more Tory chaos yesterday. I mean, obviously, and we've got to reiterate this. This does happen before a general election. There's always people who do resign.
63 though.
But that's the key thing here. There's a lot of Conservative MPs who've decided not to stand at the next election. Both of these MPs who stood down yesterday were very kind of respectful in their resignations. They didn't say it was because of anything particular wrong in the Conservative Party. There weren't any digs or anything particularly kind of.
Although Heappey had been calling for more expenditure on defence.
Sure.
Wow,
it's going.
Aubrey, do you think this could be good news for the Tory party, beyond the election, I mean, in the sense that with so many people quitting, it means that a fresh batch of new people will come in with new ideas? Will this mean a rebranded Tory party rather than more of the same?
Good question.
It's going to look very different. And actually, one of the most interesting things that's going on in the background is you're seeing Conservative MPs that are staying in Parliament, anticipating that Rishi Sunak might lose the next general election and turning their attention to the leadership contest that would follow. And so there's a huge amount of sort of work being done under the surface to build rapport with and relationships with the new MPs that are going to come into Parliament. They are the ones that are currently being sort of fought for, so that after the general election, when there's a leadership contest, people are already.
I think it's a really, really interesting point because if you look across Europe, I said this last week. If you look across Europe, the rise of those sort of I can't keep the straight face. That sort of right-wing group, if you like, parties in all sorts of countries, and many people who are true Conservatives, gang, would say this Tory party is not. Wow. This is not a traditional Tory party. High taxation, the military, policemen and women on the streets. I believe that what will come from what we all believe will probably be a Labour victory, but we could be wrong. We have to be open-minded. Will they reincarnate the Tory party? And I think you're right. I think people who don't want to be part of that or perceived to be part of the past will go, and it will change. I think that will definitely happen, don't you?
There will be a reset. I suppose the question is basically which wing of the party ends up stronger after the next election and is able to, if you like, kind of capture the leadership. And there's questions about whether or not you potentially have a caretaker leader, so somebody who kind of steadies the ship for a little bit, or, you know, somebody who really, wants to sort of take the party back into government. But you've got all sorts of candidates vying behind the scenes, people like Kemi Badenoch, people like Grant Shapps. James Cleverly is a sort of dark horse. People don't talk about him as much, but he probably would be somebody who would go for it in the future as well. So all of that kind of manoeuvring and anticipation is already happening now.
And Alicia, talk to me about Jonathan Gullis, because he's been appointed the new deputy, or a new deputy chairman of the Conservative Party. Do you think that he was the obvious person to put in place to replace Lee Anderson?
Well, I mean, I guess there's two arguments you could have about that. On the one hand, you could very much say, yes, he's from a similar wing of the party to Lee Anderson. He's towards the right of the party, believes in quite similar things to Lee Anderson.
He's a cheerleader, isn't he? He's a fighter,
He's certainly very vocal.
Very vocal in a similar way that Lee was, I guess. And they're both kind of often caught up in some kind of newspaper headline for saying something that doesn't quite align with what Rishi Sunak said. So in that sense, yes, but then you could probably also say that's probably a strange choice because part of the reason that Lee Anderson had to leave that role was because of doing that. So they've kind of replaced him with a candidate who's pretty similar.
Listen, I like Gullis, but it's another example,
isn't it? Do you think he's making the same mistake?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Is it just Sunak going, oh, I'll tell you what, I'm worried about the red wall. Let's get, somebody who knows quite vocal from Stoke, and I'm worried about Cornwall, so let's get a tin miner who doesn't know. It's just all a bit like haphazard to me. That's what I think.
I guess also what the Prime Minister keeps trying to do is balance between those on the right of the party and those towards the centre of the political spectrum. He's
you
trying
wanted
to kind
the job, pal.
make
Good luck.
that balance and trying to make sure that he equally represents people from all wings of the party. So I guess that's probably what he's trying to do with that appointment.
Aubrey, can I pick you up on something? Yesterday, you tweeted, this is interesting, that Gaza vote some weeks ago, and Starmer allegedly, we make the point, putting pressure on the Speaker, Lindsay Hall, to ignore the SNP and all that sort of stuff. Tell us what you were talking about yesterday, because this is Parliament maybe bringing Sir Keir Starmer to task.
Yes, and so effectively, in the weeks after the Gaza vote, there have been concerted efforts by Conservative MPs, including people in the Cabinet, to try and make Keir Starmer account for whatever conversations happened between him and the Commons Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle. I believe that the Commons leader, Penny Mordaunt, is very sympathetic to some sort of formal investigation. The interesting aspect to all this as well is that it would kind of drag in the Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, as well. So it's not just a sort of political point about Keir Starmer. It does potentially raise the prospect of the government moving very slowly against the Commons Speaker as well. So there are 58 MPs who've signed this new motion, if you like, which calls for an investigation by the Privileges Committee.
Does there have to be a number for it to go through, or is it
not necessarily? They're trying to actually kind of use a different process for initiating one of these investigations. Normally, it's up to the Speaker to decide whether to allow an investigation. In this case, obviously, he was intimately involved, so they got his 3 deputies to adjudicate. They said no, so they're trying this different mechanism instead, which we might hear more about in the next few days.
And Alicia, Grant Shapps has heaped more pressure on Rishi Sunak to commit to spending, greater spending of GDP, on a defence budget. Is that the sign of a cohesive cabinet, though, for him to be talking to newspapers, speaking publicly about the demands on Rishi Sunak? Can't you just reach across the table?
I think it's a leadership pitch, isn't it?
Well, I mean, you could say that, but also this definitely isn't the first time that someone quite senior in Cabinet has pretty much briefed against what the Prime Minister has chosen to do. And this issue with defence spending is a difficult one, because obviously if you look across the globe, you could say now or never, really. I mean, when would you need defence spending more than at the moment? But then on a political rung, it's not really a vote winner. So leading up to an election, lots of people, don't look at me like that, hear me out.
I think it would be, I would say it would be a traditional Tory voter winner. That's what I would say.
Maybe, but I think when you're looking at it in the broader picture, I think maybe in a normal general election, but at the moment, probably not. I don't think lots of people are going to say, oh, brilliant, the cost of living crisis is really bad, all of this is really wrong, but they're going to spend an extra 0.5% of GDP on defence. That's probably not going to swing people's vote.
I think it's really interesting. I don't know what Nick thinks, all of you, actually. There's always a moment when a parliament's ending and a Prime Minister's tenure is ending, and all the polls would point to that. We can't say it's going to happen. You watch all these individuals, the Shapps, the Cleverleys, whatever, they start to unsubtly not toe the party line. Because if they think he's going down, mate, they will absolutely, I'm now Mike Graham, they will absolutely throw him aside. And I think the next few months will be quite interesting. It happens to every single leader, because they're trying to work out now who they should get close to, who might get the job, what the future brings. That's what happens. It's a dirty old job, isn't it, politics?
Yeah, sometimes MPs really do see the writing on the wall, and they want to be sort of in the right position. They want to say after the general election, look, I warned that this was going to happen. Although I suppose during the heat of the election campaign itself, you do see people sort of retreat into their trenches. So for those final 6 weeks, I imagine we'll see everybody vary on message. But in the sort of longer campaign, I think you're absolutely right. People will be positioning for after a future leadership contest.
Very interesting indeed. Well, thank you to Alicia Fitzgerald and Aubrey Allegretti from The Times.
In the rave that is this room.
Apologies for the flashing background there. Well, let's take